Strange, chair of the Northern Plains Ag Task Force. This is the book we're going to be discussing with the author tonight. It's a fascinating book. Um, Austin Frerick is an expert on agriculture and antitrust policy, and this book came out just last year called Barron's Money, Power, and the Corruption of America's Food Industry. It profiles a series of powerful magnates that have unprecedented power in the global food system. Barron's has received universal acclaim, including a coveted star review from both Publishers Weekly and Kirkus Reviews, and has been named one of the best books of 2024. So thank you very much, Austin, for taking the time to address us, and I'll just turn it over to you.
No, thank you for that. I have to tell you, this is the part of the book process I enjoy the most. I don't like writing. So also doing these type of talks, you hear the best information. So let me share my screen with you all. All right, can I get a thumbs up if you can see that? Oh, hold on. It's like way at the, maybe it's go back. Okay. So before I get going, I want to show you this slide because my favorite review for this book came from the American Conservatives. It said, quote, conservatives should read Frerick's book. And the reason I want to flag that is I really do think this is one of the most bipartisan things in America. I think most people, for different reasons, see the food system as not working. And I think a lot of it has to do with this chart right here. So big ag will justify this really destructive system that's hurting farmers and workers by saying, well, this system makes cheap food. Here's the thing. When you actually use USDA's data itself, that's not true. So enjoy me for like a nerd moment for a second. So if industry wants to be correct, what they'll say is as a percent of income, what you spend on food is the lowest in the world. That's actually factually true. That's at 6.8%. Here's the thing. Income growth in America is unequal. We live in such a have-not society. What matters is what people spend out of pocket. And if you look at what the average American spends at the grocery store, it's at $3,694. We spend more money on food than Spain, UK, Mexico, Greece, Japan, Germany. And here's the thing, like anyone that's been like a place like Italy knows what a dollar gets you there is very different than a dollar here. Before I get going, let me back up a second too and show you this slide. So to understand my book, I'm profiling 7 robber barons. I'm intentionally using that robber baron framework to show people, and just total side note, I realized a few months ago when I gave this lecture to college class that Gen Z doesn't know what robber barons were. So I had to explain that. But what I'm showing people is we've been here before. I think we're living in another gilded age. And part of by showing you we've been here before is we've dealt with these. I mean, I'm talking to Montana people. You guys dealt with your copper barons. We know what to do here. We've climbed these mountains. And so I'm using these robber barons as narrative devices to tell bigger structural stories. So think of it as like hiding the vegetable. So like I'm going to talk to you today about Cargill. Cargill's my grain baron. That chapter is really about the farm bill, but I'm telling it through like a punchy robber baron story. So, but before we kind of dive in, so I'm going to focus on 3 barons today. I'm going to do Cargill as my grain baron, JBS as my slaughtering baron, and then Iowa Select Farms as my hog baron. But before I do, I just want to show you a few of these slides. So we talked about price, how we're paying more, and part of that goes to is concentration of the food system. I really do believe the most concentrated space in the American economy is food. So here's a graph from Bloomberg Law. This is like 2 or 3 years ago, and they did this right before Thanksgiving, where the whole point of the story was every meat in America, or protein, I should say, including salmon and tuna, were under investigation for price fixing, except turkey. And then 2 weeks later, turkey was under investigation for price fixing. Here's the thing. Most economists say markets are concentrated once 4 companies have like a 25% market share. Most of these proteins, 3 companies have like an 70, 80% market share. And here's the thing though, even when we talk about this, we're talking national figures. You're not taking a cattle from Montana. You're not going to go butcher in, I don't know, pick a North Carolina. These are regional. And so when you start looking at these markets regional, it's even more concentrated. My buddy Pete Harding of Wisconsin, he runs a dairy publication called Milkweed. I had him do a paper, 3 years ago, on New England milk markets. And he just, through his research, he discovered one company has an 85% market share in milk in New England. And I don't need a PhD in econ to know that those people are not paying a fair price for milk when that market's that concentrated. And so to me, this concentration is really why we're paying more for less quality products in the grocery store. And here's the thing, though, and like never forget this: the goal of any corporate executive is monopoly. That's what profits are. Corporations don't want competitive markets. That's hard. It's ruthless. You want to get to a concentrated market where you can gouge, where you can get the cream off the top. And here's the other weird thing going on is historically it was the way you would price fix was a bunch of guys would get together at a hotel next to the interstate. Those days are gone. Now what the companies do is they share data through third-party brokers. So in the meat industry, the famous ones known as agrostats, where these are all the different meat companies in the world and the different proteins they do. And what they do is they'll share their information. So like in the chicken industry, the chicken companies will say, they'll tell each other how many baby chickens are going to do in a few weeks. This company aggregates the data and gives it back to the companies de-identified, saying, well, we project this. So this is basically a quasi-legal way that allows companies to collude, reduce the supply with, instead of being in a hotel room. And to me, first of all, this kind of behavior is becoming rampant in the American economy. You might have heard about it. The most famous example of this right now is in apartments. A lot of big landlords in big cities are basically doing the same thing. They're sharing their rental data to essentially, to collude. And then I want to show you this chart. This is from RCAF, a cattle organization, where this is, to me, is like the nerdy version of, that phrase, picture says 1,000 words. Well, this is like a graph says 1,000 words. This to me is a textbook example of monopoly. So this red line is what cattle ranchers get for their cattle. And the blue line is what you pay for beef in the stores. And if you basically look up through 2015, they were in step. That was showing a competitive market. And what you see since 2015 is a divergence. And it was at its worst was actually in that early COVID, that May 2020. And you just see a massive gap between what ranchers were getting, what you were paying at the store. And it's just, that's just monopoly capture right there. And so keep in mind that whole gap right there is not only money being taken out of farmers' pockets, but also money then not being spent in real communities, being captured by these robber barons. And my understanding, the only reason why this market has tightened since then is because the American cattle herd's essentially collapsing in front of us right now. We're at 1950 levels. And then the other thing too to keep in mind here is things got so bad where this past fall, so let me back up. McDonald's is the largest buyer of beef in the world. In most industries, you treat your largest customer the best way possible. Whatever they want, they get. McDonald's filed lawsuits this past fall saying the beef packers were price fixing. So things were bad when even McDonald's feels like it's being squeezed. And finally, I'm going to show this academic article from a fellow Iowan, Kate Conlow, where there's this great documentary came out like 10 years ago about how the Great Recession happened called Inside Job. And one of the things they discovered were the banks were paying a lot of academics to essentially write articles justifying deregulation. And so what we did in response was say, hey, if you're going to write articles paid for by Bank of America, you have to disclose it. Well, here's the thing. So a lot of, these policies were created, but in agriculture, no one's enforcing them. And what Kate discovered was, it's really bad in food and agriculture economics, where you have literally, she highlights an academic who, you go to his website, he brags about all the corporate money he takes. He edits these websites, doesn't disclose in these journals that he's taking the money. And then he's the one going on NPR saying you're not being gouged. It really corrupts the public conversation here. And finally, too, to keep in mind, so this is from the New York Times. Like last fall, they did this thing of they rated the butters and then they rated Kerrygold. It's like that Irish butter. That's the best butter. You talk to any grocery person, Kerrygold is doing blockbuster numbers right now. It's more yellow, it's creamier. Here's the thing. It's just the way we used to do butter in America. It's cows on pasture. Most cows in America now are in these industrial things eating corn. So they have a lot of starch in their diets, and so it's not as spreadable. And I say this because this system is making bad tasting food. I think everyone kind of sees it, especially meat and dairy inputs matter. And a cow in a New Mexico desert eating corn is not going to make as good of a product as a cow on pasture. So here's my first baron. This is the baron that kind of started the whole thing. Iowa Select Farms, they do 5 million hogs a year. They are the most powerful political family in Iowa. And this whole thing started in 2018, where I didn't know at the time Iowa doesn't have campaign contribution limits. So they wrote a check to the governor of Iowa for $300,000. And someone in a bar was telling me this, some political person, we were talking. And what got my attention though was not only that donation, but that allegedly, so they have a jet and they have a home in the fancy part of Des Moines and they have a home down in Naples, Florida, and they'd fly back and forth in between the two. But this person also told me allegedly on their jet were the words, "When pigs fly." That captured my attention of this, what a powerful symbol what happened to Iowa in my lifetime. Like Iowa should be the Tuscany of North America, but I kind of view Iowa as almost an extraction colony at this point. The rural Iowa is producing the most it's ever produced, but none of that wealth is staying there. So I originally wrote this article with a buddy for Vox. How did one man mass this much power? And there's this notion in econ, well, this is about efficiency. He's the best at doing it. And what you realize, no. This is just an old-fashioned regulatory capture and corruption. So here's one of his operations. I mean, this is a common sight outside of most, when you drive rural Iowa, you see these dumpsters next to most of these. I call them metal sheds. People call them CAFOs, confinements, whatever. But about 10% of pigs die inside these facilities. So you'll see just dumpsters full of the bodies. First of all, just imagine what that does for a worker. You're dealing with that all day and just driving in your community, seeing that. And then here's one of his operations. To me, when I look at that picture, I think how dead that looks. Like that to me looks like the New Jersey Turnpike. It's so industrial. It's so devoid of life. And then here's his office or his farm. And the undercurrent of my book too is who is a farmer. Like, are you a farmer if your office looks like a suburban dentist clinic? This is over by the fancy mall, suburban Des Moines. And so part of the reason why he gave the governor so much money, in my opinion, is he operates in 2/3 of the counties in Iowa. And this whole operation is in Iowa. And it's all based on this like race to the bottom production model where he needs to control the governor essentially so he can kind of do his own thing. To step back for a second, to understand how we got to this point, they call it to this point where you have a bunch of millions of hogs and sheds. You have to go back to chicken. So a century ago, in response to the jungle, when we wrote these regulations to go after the meat industry to regulate them, we did not write chicken to the regulations because there weren't commercial chicken slaughterhouses. You just had a chicken in your backyard, you bring it in your kitchen and butcher it. So it happened down south where corporations took that exploitive sharecropping model and applied it to chicken. So if you're a chicken farmer to this day in America, you do not own your bird. You're given the feed. You're basically a glorified babysitter. You're a sharecropper. Give it back to the company. This really exploitive tournament system they pay you that pits you against each other. And like 70% chicken farmers to this day in America like live in poverty. It's a very exploitive model. Here's the thing. When you engage in a really exploitive model, it makes a cheap price because you're shifting the costs onto other people. USDA could have made chicken behave like the other meats, but it didn't. Especially in this what you see is a race to the bottom in the meat industry. They call it chickenization. So hogs chickenized. It started in North Carolina, actually. In the 1980s, a state senator wrote regulations to allow the chickenization of hogs, and then he built a company himself. And to me, this is one of the best examples of structural racism in the American food system because he did in the poor black areas. So, you'll see these stories where, I should say, these hogs defecate a ton. Like a hog defecates 3 times more than you. So in Iowa, we have 25 million hogs. That's manure of 75 million people. That's California, Texas, and Illinois combined. At the same time, we've gutted that regulatory structure. But they do in Iowa, when they drain the manure ponds, they just inject it into the soil. But in North Carolina, because of the water table levels, they sprayed into the air. So you have all these stories of poor black churches, having to repaint their steeple every few years because it turns brown. So what happened in Iowa is North Carolina started getting all this market share, and USDA again could have stepped in and saying like, no, you can't do this. We're not going to do this race to the bottom, but it didn't. The elite of Iowa essentially was like, no, we're going to maintain our #1 hog status, and we will engage in this race to the bottom. And what you essentially see is you see Wall Street capital flood into these industrial operations, and the family farm collapses. What tends to happen, there's always like a glut moment where there's just too much there's too much of something, and then the family farms exit the business. They blame themselves. They don't realize they were designed to fail, and the industrial operations with access to Wall Street capital survive, and they dominate the space. This recently happened in dairy, and it's happening now in beef. And here's what the consequences of this is. 2/3 of the waterways in Iowa are too toxic, or just they're open sewer. They're too toxic to go into. Most beaches in Iowa in the summer you can't go into because the E. coli levels are too high. The other big thing too now is Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in America. And I can tell you it's not because Iowans, fake bake, or the legislators in Des Moines will blame it because of the alcohol consumption, but you're like, Wisconsin drinks more. It's clear that it's related to this intensive production model because this whole system is predicated on every year's a record corn crop. We got to do more hogs. We don't care about what the consequences of it because my hog baron doesn't live in the consequences. He lives in Naples, Florida. And the other thing to keep in mind here with hogs is so in America, like our chicken consumption is going up. You see our beef consumption is essentially flat. Oh, sorry. This is export. Sorry. I interpreted this graph wrong. Our pork consumption is flat, but we're producing more and more pork every year, and this is for export. So a lot of this is from Mexico and China. And so we have to ask ourselves, is it worth destroying rural America to feed China or to feed Mexico? But that's essentially what we're doing. So Cargill. Cargill's my grain baron, as I said earlier. Think of Cargill as the closest modern day example to Standard Oil. Cargill is the largest private company in America. They are bigger than the Koch brothers, but no one knows who they are because they're very secretive. But they move 1 in 3, 1 in 4 grains globally. Check out this little nugget from one of their brochures. Quote, "We are the flour in your bread, the wheat in your noodles, the salt on your fries. We are the corn in your tortillas, the chocolate in your dessert, the sweetener in your soft drink. We are the oil in your salad dressing, the beef, pork, or chicken you eat for dinner. We are the cotton in your clothing, the backing on your carpet, and the fertilizer in your field." First of all, that's good prose. Second, that is power. They are like the most powerful middleman that no one knows about. And here's the thing, like I grew up next to Cargill. I went to church next to Cargill, played soccer next to Cargill plant, and I went to I was born next to a Cargill plant. I don't know if I said that one. Church, soccer, birth. Yeah. But I didn't know who they were. Like when I originally was going to do this book, I didn't plan to write about Cargill. I just kind of like happened into it. To put their size in context, what they do in revenue each year is equal to tax revenue of all these states, including Iowa and Montana and grain. And so I use their story to tell the story of the Farm Bill. The original Farm Bill comes out of the Dust Bowl. American farmers when Europe was at war in World War I, the government asked farmers to step up to feed Europe because their land was out of production. So farmers did. Then after the war, there was a glut in the market. And what happens was when there's a glut in the markets, people tend to push their land. They're engaging in destructive environmental practices in order just to save their land and squeak by. But that makes the thing worse. So you have a farm crisis. So the Farm Bill comes along. Think of it like Goldilocks, the original Farm Bill, the New Deal Farm Bill, where you get a little subsidy, but then you also have a stick where you have to take land out of production. At the same time, too, you can only get so much. So it's trying to find that sweet spot of producing just enough but not too much. Here's the thing. Cargill hated it because Cargill wants overproduction of grain because it wants to move as much grain as possible. So anything that kind of tries to limit or manage the grain supply, they hate. So they thought FDR was evil. They thought he was Marxist. Turns out FDR, the New Deal Farm Bill is really good for business because it stabilized markets. And they really went from a regional to a national player during this time. And here's the thing, like check out, this is from USDA. This is every dollar you spent at the store, what a farmer gets. And what we see after those New Deal reforms, the highest ever recorded in history was more than 50 cents on the dollar. Fast forward to now, it's about 11 cents, the lowest ever recorded. So imagine what rural America would be if more than half the money went back to it that it produced. And what you see is just the slow decline, this like corporate capture of the Farm Bill. And in this chapter, I really focus on the 1996 Farm Bill. I call it the Wall Street Farm Bill because basically the Farm Bill is built for Wall Street and no one else. And what the Farm Bill does now is all those kind of Goldilocks things went away. So I think the best example, and sorry if this is the people on the farmers on the call, this is repetitive. When people hear crop insurance, they tend to think it's for like thunderstorms and stuff. It's not. It's insurance for low prices, where like 60% of the premium is paid for by taxpayers. But it also only applies to certain crops. So it applies to corn, but not carrots. So basically, it's de-risking growing corn and it's pushing people to do grains. Also, there's not caps on this stuff. So like unbeknownst to most people, Bill Gates is one of the largest owners of farmland in America. He can get as much basically low price insurance for real corn as he wants. So here's the thing: the Farm Bill's picking favorites. It's picking grains over fresh produce. So it's pushing farmers to do this thing. Because in the day, that's what Cargill wants. It wants an overproduction of corn. So what are the consequences of this? Is right now we're subsidizing processed food and not healthy food. And it's so clearly, there's a scholar at UC Santa Cruz, Julie Guthman, has written about this. The obesity crisis in America is really rooted in this structural thing, this farm bill thing, where to eat healthy in America, you need money. And the other thing too that I didn't appreciate till recently was I was talking with a banker in Western Iowa 2 years ago, and I was asking her, why did all the silos I grew up seeing, they're gone or they're all falling apart? And she explained to me it goes back to the farm bill. Think of like a family farm as like a retirement portfolio. You have multiple crops going. That way, in case one craters, you have other ones. What the system does now is it pushes people to do one or two things. And here's the thing: it makes you very, very fragile. What you see in this chart right here is this is from Wall Street Journal showing like what percent of farms would grow different crops. And what you essentially see is this first half of the 20th century, family farms did a bunch of different things. And what you slowly see is them become is specialized in one or two things. So it used to be like in Iowa, farmers would grow the grain to feed their own animals. That's gone. Either you grow grain, you sell it to Cargill, and Cargill then sells that grain as a feed to an industrial operator who then grows an animal. But what you see, these concentrated systems are incredibly fragile. And actually really expensive too. Because they're so fragile, they break, and you have to do massive bailouts. And the final thing with Cargill is I realized at the end is I originally thought of them as Standard Oil, I mentioned, but I think a better example of Cargill is actually they're a modern day version of the 19th century British Empire. The sun never sets on Cargill's grain empire. They're still in Russia. You don't know who they are, so I don't feel like the need to pull out. And here's just a little example of their power is Oxfam reported in the Financial Times like 10 years ago that I believe it's Colombia. Yes, Colombia, that Colombia had a massive civil war, killed 250,000 people. And one of the things they did in response afterwards was the society was saying land reform. You can only own so much land. Oxfam discovered not only did Cargill exceed that, it exceeded that by 36 times, which is so scary because you're just seeing the tip of the Titanic iceberg right there. It's like just how powerful this family is. And even researching them, Cargill never tends to do things directly. It tends to use middlemen. They'll finance like an organization that then do its bidding. So JBS, this is the third brand I want to talk with you guys about. So JBS is my slaughtering baron. They are the largest meat packer we've ever seen in the history of mankind. So this story is wild. And meat's kind of what I know. And I didn't even fully know this because a lot of this went down right before the 2020 election and got lost. So the Batista brothers, JBS is a Brazilian company. They were found to have bribed over 1,800 Brazilian politicians in order to get essentially cheap money from banks to essentially buy a bunch of companies. As part of their plea bargain, they agreed to wear a wire bribing the president of Brazil at the time, Michel Temer, who was living at the vice president's house because he thought his house was haunted, this home right here. So when this news came out, I should say, you got to think of the Batista brothers as they're basically a mafia company. They're the closest thing we have in corporate America to a mafioso thing, which is saying a lot given this moment. But on the day their plea bargain was announced for bribery of 1,800 politicians, and I'm not talking campaign contributions, I'm talking like they gave Manhattan an apartment. They allegedly engaged in insider trading because they knew their stock price would go down. This behavior is baked into this corporation. It has been accused of engaging in child labor, bribing meat inspectors. I mean, you name it, they've done it. I've been alleged to have done it. I gotta be careful with my words here. So the number one beef in the world, number one in beef, number one in poultry, number two in pork, number one in leather. They employ 250,000 people. So here's all the brands they own. Here's the first slide. And keep in mind, they didn't really sell meat in America until George Bush, when they came in with all their cheap, but a bunch of money, just bought a bunch of American brands, or companies, I should say. So this is the first slide. Here's the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth. You could be buying their brands and not know it. If you notice, their name is not on any one of these brands. The one that got me was this one called Cedar River Farms. I was eating at a fancy restaurant in DC like 5, 10 years ago, and I saw, restaurants do our beef was supplied by. This restaurant was doing that, and I'm from Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids is named after the Cedar River. I was like, oh, this must be a farm near Cedar Rapids. I've never heard of it, so I'm gonna go look it up later. I looked up later. It's just a fake local meat brand that JBS created. And they're also doing this on the East Coast. So they're building all these fake local meat stores to kind of exploit the image a lot of family farms are doing, but to their personal benefit. Here's the thing with JBS when you read this chapter, my anger is not even really at them. To me, they remind me of a kid that's never really been disciplined, so they keep pushing the limits. My anger was actually at Secretary Tom Vilsack under Biden. I think fixing the American meat system was one of the most bipartisan things. And the fact is, not only did he not do anything, the meat markets got more concentrated under President Biden. And in my personal opinion, I think it helped contributed to the loss of Vice President Harris because people were being gouged at the store. All the major meat companies under the Biden administration made acquisitions, got bigger. And the scariest part, too, is Walmart is going into the beef business. It just opened a plant near Wichita because Walmart was being sick of being gouged by these packers. So the fact that Walmart's taking things in its own hand tells you how bad things are, and we should not depend on Walmart to save us. But that is where we are. Walmart is the largest employer in America, and they're the richest family in the world. So what did Vilsack do? First of all, he kept giving government contracts to JBS, which, I'm sorry, if you're employing children, we found 14 middle schoolers working in these slaughterhouses, and you still give them government contracts. What are consequences for your actions? On top of it, his theory of dealing with these concentrated markets was, let me take $1 billion of taxpayer money and throw it at new slaughterhouses. First of all, there is no example in American history that you deconcentrate a market by throwing money at startups. You're just lighting it on fire. Because do you think for a second that JBS, they're willing to employ middle schoolers? Do you think they're going to give you an ounce of market share? And what's happening now is a lot of these companies are going broke. I mean, I wish them the best of luck. But like in Iowa, for example, one of the chicken companies they financed liquidated this past fall, where there were literally stories in Iowa news saying, come get a free chicken. Not enough people came to get a free chicken. So the state of Iowa spent millions of dollars just killing a bunch of chickens. And here's the thing with Vilsack. He was industrial, between Obama and Biden, he was an industrial dairy lobbyist. He behaved like a lobbyist. He wanted to pretend to do something, but he didn't do anything. And I didn't mention this earlier, but in my hog chapter, one of his campaigns for governor, his re-election campaign, centered on these hog things in Iowa. There was a real rebellion over hogs in Iowa. Even Pat Buchanan, when he ran for president in 1992, opposed them. You had people filling gyms, promising to do something. Vilsack said he's here to help. And the way Iowa works is only the governor of Iowa can stop the construction of hog things. After Vilsack won, not only did he not do anything, he oversaw the largest expansion of hog confinements in Iowa history. This type of rhetoric, this type of behavior is really detrimental to democracy. When someone says they're here to help, but they're stabbing you in the back. This reference, I realize, only usually works in Iowa, but I think if you've ever seen the musical Music Man, Tom Vilsack is Harold Hill. He's a snake oil man, con man. He'll tell you what you want to hear, but his words mean nothing. But here's the thing. It's both parties. I mean, this is Trump's largest inauguration donor was JBS. They gave him $5 million. One of the first things the administration did was speed up the kill lines. They made one of the most dangerous jobs in America more dangerous. So why I said earlier, I think this is one of the most bipartisan things in America. It was bipartisan, the corruption that got us to this point. But I cannot say this not. I think people are clamoring for a Teddy Roosevelt moment here. We know what
girl,
to do
you got
here.
some lungs on you.
All those concerts for so many years.
There you go.
Oh, I thought I did something. Let me skip these 2 slides. So what to do? I mean, the whole point of my book is, can you hear me? Thumbs up?
Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry, Austin. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. You got to understand how you got here. So in order to fix things, so to me, the biggest thing we need to do in the food system is put animals back on the land. Is either you can have family farms or you can have Walmart, or you can have industrial operations run in Chicago. They're better for rural communities. These people pay taxes. They send their kids to local schools. They make a better tasting product. And like that to me, especially that's the focus. And especially we know ethanol is going to die. Cars are moving to EVs. Bloomberg reported Norway last year, for the first time ever, 100% of their cars being sold were EVs. That's just where the technology is going. And unbeknownst to most people, the largest use of corn now in America is ethanol. It's like 50% of the corn crop. What are we going to do? My goal is phase out ethanol, put animals on the land. So second, is bright line rules. And this is something you can do at the state level.
Three people that I never even hear from on Facebook decided they were going to comment, and all Trump fans.
Okay, there you go. Send that to your buddies. See you guys.
Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, see you.
Hey, someone there isn't muted and kind of interfering with the discussion. To kind of look at your mute button, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, go back to that spot. Bright line rules. So for example, we have a rule in the books. We don't enforce it, and I don't know if it's on the books in Montana. I encourage you to look into it. It's called the Packer ban. Basically says you cannot own the animal you slaughter if you're so big. And unbeknownst to most people, like the largest butcher of hogs in America is a Chinese company called the WH Group of Shanghai. They also own the most hogs. They own 1 in 5 hogs. They're actually bigger than my hog baron. If you enforce this rule, you break them up because they can't own. You can't be a farmer and also a butcher. So that's one rule to consider: is once you're so big, you can't do both. Another example, and this actually we had this back at the Teddy Roosevelt era, was you can't, if you're a meat packer, you can't be in retail if you're so big. So if you did that rule, and again, I really encourage people to start thinking at the state level because we know DC is not going to do anything for the next 3 years. But I think forgotten history is a lot of the New Deal came out of states. It came out of places like Wisconsin, trying things. And then because you got to have proof of concepts. Oh, look what we did here. And then you scale. And so for like a retail thing, if just pass a rule saying you can't retail if you're so big meat. And that would essentially stop Walmart from selling its meat or like making that vertical play. Because right now, I didn't even mention this. Walmart's my grocery baron. Walmart's also doing this in milk. Walmart's building a bunch of milk plants right now in America. It has 3 online. And the question is, do we want Walmart essentially controlling our food system? I mean, fun little fact, the Walmart family already owns 2 NFL teams. So think of that way. How do you essentially stop vertical integration by putting in these hardline, clear rules? You want to make them simple and clear because lawyers make their living from gradation. The other thing too is using institutional buyers to drive the supply chain system. It's good politics. Like all beef served in Montana should come from Montana farmers. Such a simple, powerful thing though of keeping your money locally. It's good food. It's better food. I mean, because right now what's happening is as the American cattle herd is really shrinking, Brazilian beef is flooding the markets. This is what this slide is showing. Is in March 2024, there was 37 some amount of Brazil meat coming in. Now it's 106. It's a 3x increase in 1 year. So and then here's the thing: Brazil beef, a very high portion of it that's come from the Amazon rainforest, done in really exploitive ways. The Montana farmer doing it right can't compete on price. So why not make sure our kids are eating good food? And do this because putting a local green pepper in a Dollar Tree or Dollar General doesn't change anything. Schools buy a lot. And it stabilizes farmers. Most farmers will tell you they don't like doing the farmers market to get rained out, but schools are consistent and colleges are consistent. And one little example that I really love is, and I heard about this in a water park hotel in Wisconsin in December, was historically in Native American tribes, we would just dump surplus food on them. What they're doing up in northern Wisconsin is they're buying from Native farmers, giving food to Native people. So they're buying bison, they're buying wild rice, giving it to farmers. And you see them going from 7 producers to 30 in 3 years. You don't do this overnight, but you slowly build this up, and then you show that this works. So then when there's a moment of change, powers that be in DC can essentially take that really cool thing and expand it. Because here's the thing, I can't say this enough. Most Americans are good. Most people are good people trying to do the right thing. It's the greed of a few holding us back. So a lot of people are like, there's a lot of cool things going on. The question is figuring them out, highlighting them, building on that success. So the fourth thing is rethinking the farm bill. I'm done. We need to stop picking favorites and instead incentivize farm practices. Move away from this like corn over carrots kind of mentality. Say, hey, if you do cover crops, you get so much money. If you do buffer strips, you get so much money. Let farmers decide what's best for their land, but essentially push for sustainable farm practices and not pick favorites. 5, and this one is, it's hard. It was hard to talk about at first, but like the domestic ownership of the food system, most meat now in America is owned by non-American companies, Brazilian or Chinese usually. the weird thing about it here is, I really think for national sovereignty, your food system should be American owned. And here's the thing, we did this in the media for the longest time in America. In order to own a TV station or radio station in America, you had to be American owned. That essentially collapsed with Rupert Murdoch because he was Australian and he wanted to buy TV stations. But the thing too to keep in mind with a lot of these foreign owned meat companies they're state-backed monopolies. So American companies can't even compete fairly against these companies because they're getting unfair access to capital. And the other thing too is we got to rethink USDA. I mean, by every metric, USDA has failed. I mean, USDA seems to only care about Wall Street anymore. And when I'm talking about the political appointees, I'm not. Most of the bureaucrats are, they're there to do a good job, but there's a revolving door at USDA that all they seem to care about is Wall Street. And to me, the best example of that is that stat I showed you earlier of what people spend to store what a farmer gets. And I mean, I could critique Vilsack all day, but I mean, to be fair, there hasn't been a good USDA secretary in my lifetime. Another thing too, this is honestly, people like me are so beneficial to this, or lucky to have this, is journalists are your friends. See something, say something. Here's a really good example of that. When I was talking to that banker in Western Iowa, what she also told me is Iowa has this cool program where to control the deer population, we pay hunters can trying to remember how this works. Hunters can donate their bucks to local meat lockers, and the state of Iowa will pay the meat lockers to process it and to give them meat to food banks. Great program. Here's the thing. No one was testing for lead in the meat. Some hunters use lead bullets. So I let this reporter know. Nina spent 6 months on this. She came out with the big story that only the state of Minnesota is testing for lead shrapnel in its meat at the food banks. So that's the power you have to see something, say something. Is most journalists, they're moving a mile a minute. They're not paying that much. They have a lot to do. So anything you can do to tip them off, or even if you read a story and you don't like what someone said or they quoted the wrong person, don't get mad on social media. Just send them an email saying like, hey, you should really talk to this person. The other example, and this one's a graphic, but it's like ingrained in my head, is, have you ever seen the movie Fargo? There's that famous scene at the end with a mulcher. Well, in Western Iowa, a confinement owner was essentially doing that to his hogs. He was taking those dumpster hogs, instead of paying to get them processed, he was just throwing them into a mulcher and throwing the parts on his field. That's illegal. An Iowa woman saw it, reported to the state. State didn't do anything. So you know what she did? She called local TV news. TV news from Omaha came out, did a story, it blew up. And guess what? Something was done. She took matters in her own hands, and she sent an email and got something done. So that, especially in these moments right now of rampant corruption, that's the power you have. Another thing too is keep in mind, when you elect a governor or a president, you're electing tons of appointees. Who do you want in these seats? Who do you want to be the USDA state director from Montana? I really encourage folks to think of names, because these are really powerful positions. And it's a lot easier if you have a friend in that position than you're trying to convince some lobbyist to do the right thing. Research and write about this stuff. I mean, this is something like I think about a lot right now. Is we know the meat system's broken, but what should it be? Like, what do you want the future Montana to be 50 years from now? Like, we didn't get here overnight, and it's going to take decades of work to get there, but you got to think about what you want it to be. And here's a really cool little example of this law student I worked with a few years ago on a conference I did was wondering why there's only one grocery store in New Haven. Why was it so bad? She looked into it. She realized there's all these little agreements landlords do to essentially stop other grocery stores from coming in. Or sorry, other grocery stores do to stop other grocery stores from coming in. These like agreements. And so essentially now you're seeing now that we know that this happens, states are moving to essentially ban this practice. You see this a lot with Walmart's actually. When a Walmart closes, they'll put in like certain deed restrictions, so essentially stop a new grocery store from coming in. And finally, I mean, I'm talking to you all tonight, join an organization. I cannot stress this enough. This is something I really learned writing this book. You cannot do this alone. You need to be part of a community. Iowa CCI was really important for me. I mean, they helped put together my book tour. Actually, this is a photo. So my book opens with Julie Dunn. Julie Dunn is a retired administrative assistant, and there's one mistake in the book, to my knowledge. I identify as Julie Dunn lives in Eldora, Iowa, but I say she's from El Dorado in the book. So I opened my book with her. She fights back. She spends her retirement. She goes through every little request for a new confinement building in her area. She challenges them. She doesn't always win, but she's holding their feet to the fire, and they know because and she's part of a community of people that do this. And I mean, for me, someone like me, they're the ones I love talking to these people because they know where all the bodies are buried. And then finally, I should say too, this was taken in Iowa Falls. Iowa Falls is the hometown of my hog baron. We did a book event there. There was a one time in my launch my paper my hardcover that I was worried because you're going to the heart of the beast, and I joked to my spouse I turned on the tracker on my phone so if I showed up in a manure pit the next morning. But here's the thing: I got 50 people to come to that book event that night. You're lucky in New York. First of all, that's really big for a town of 5,000. You're lucky in New York City if you get 50 people. And it was half the people stood behind afterwards just to tell me just the stories they knew. They saw the empire being built and they saw the corners being cut. Because keep in mind, most farmers were not willing to do what they did. Most farmers did not want to shove thousands of pigs inside a metal shed all day. And so right now we live in a moment that rewards the people that are willing to essentially race to the bottom. But a lot of people don't like that. And so that is, I can't stress this enough, is you need to be part of the community because there's going to be a lot of losses along the way, but you got to have a sense of community to get through these. Also, it's fun. Like it's fun to do this with a group of people. And so finally, too, I should say, never forget the food system we have now is radical. It's radical that one man does 5 million hogs. So much of what we're talking about, it's just traditional. Like my goal is for any American to sit down in a restaurant, just have a good meal so that everyone who picked it, grew it, processed it, transported, cooked it, served it, made a reasonable living at a fair price.
Oh,
So on that note, thank you guys so much. And also, Barron's makes a great gift. I gotta get that plug in. I was gonna say Christmas gift, but we are in July. So on that note, I would love to take any questions from you. Thank you guys so much for having me here tonight.
yeah. Gee, Austin, thank you very much. I mean, that's a lot to digest, and uh, I know that we're going to have some really good questions. I just wanted to make the comment, since I've got the mic here. If you've read the book Crazies, that was
No,
one of the books that we've had a discussion with the author in this series. And the Macmillan family was one of the big landowners and owns the Crazy Mountains that features in that book and prevented some local ranchers from putting up a windmill.
so I
And
didn't
the
even know
Whitney family,
they own that.
yeah. And of course, the Whitney family is part of Cargill. They're owners of Cargill. Gusty, do we have questions in the chat and raised hands and stuff like that?
We do indeed. Yes. I'll just kind of start with the top of the queue and move down. And I have to say, Austin, love the shout out to Iowa CCI, and they seem like a really wonderful organization. So here we've got a question from Julia. Is there a political opportunity to get something done now? Or where do you see a realistic starting point? These numbers are bad. They've gotten worse in recent history. How do we get away from the consumer welfare standard that you mentioned?
Good question. I think actually the best thing you can do locally right now is focus on colleges and schools. Is a lot of people are doing it already. It's really hard. I mean, most they're given very little to feed our children. The kitchens are designed to use frozen food, not actually scratch cooking. There's a whole infrastructure to be built. But I think there's some political gain there to be had, but also you have to know here's all the little you tried to do the right thing, here's a regulation you hit. And you have to document that. You have to let a state senator know. I actually think it's really bipartisan too right now to work on this stuff. And you also got to brag about it. You got to let people know, like, it's, hey, look at this school district. They are doing this. People want to feel good right now. I can't say that enough. It's just, and I just feel in the last few months is Americans want to see other Americans being good to each other, and food, like good food for kids is such an easy way to do it. It's good photo ops for politicians of both parties. That's what I like. And also like, it's a good way to pressure. I say this as I went to a college in Iowa. Warren Buffett was a trustee for a long time, so it has a big endowment. And one of the most famous organic farms in Iowa was right behind it. And the college promised to buy from them, and it didn't. And the farm went bankrupt. And you know what I mean? Like it said the college should have been shamed into doing the right thing. It has a lot of money. Why were you feeding kids produce from Baja California when you can literally get it from you behind you and it tastes way better? But keep in mind, like right now the incentives are going towards the Baja California produce is picked by children, or like, you know, it's done in these really exploitative ways, whereas that farmer across the street has to follow certain labor environmental standards. So it is going to cost more until we get these systems changed, because everything will be subsidized. The question is what degree. But you have to have these first movers, and these colleges buy a lot, and they should be pressured into doing the right thing. At the same time, schools politically are such a win-win thing. That's why I love saying like Montana beef should, you know, all beef served in school should be Montana beef. Because for me personally, it's also a great way to outflank Republicans. They will talk this, but like I was telling cattle ranchers in Deadwood last month, sorry, my timeline's confused in my head, that it's like they should be embarrassed that the senator from New Jersey is better on cattle than their own senators in the Dakotas. It's such a like Cory Booker's better on cattle than and he's a vegan, but he is better than their two senators. Like that's embarrassing, and they should be embarrassed. So you got to be like both aggressive but positive. But that's also like my mentality. So I just think schools right now is, and you got to have proof of concepts. Like you got to have, because a lot of schools will do something here, they'll do something there. Like I actually see this a lot in slaughterhouse towns in Iowa. Slaughterhouse towns in Iowa tend to be the most diverse, most interesting towns. You'll see a lot of the workers who actually farm on the side. And then, like, for example, Storm Lake, Iowa, they have 2 Tyson plants. And you'll see the school district just buy surplus food from the farmers, and then they'll use this, you know, lemongrass grown by some, you know, Vietnamese workers to essentially educate the other kids about that culture. Like it's such a cool thing, but it's already happening. But how do you essentially build on it?
Yeah. Yeah, really, really good. I think what you just shared actually segues well. Steve Held in the chat mentioned that in Montana, there's a campaign building where we're trying to get 33 by 33, so just have more of our food produced and to like staying in the state. And so folks should definitely check out that campaign 33 by 33. But along the lines of policy, how do we make changes in the farm bill to put money into the pockets of family farms, trying to keep it more regional and not into multinational conglomerates?
Yeah, and I mean so this is something I've wrestled with a lot. I for a while really thought about just decoupling food assistance from the farm bill. Because the dirty secret is so much of Walmart's customer base and employee base needs SNAP. And so I think Walmart will protect food assistance. But I think the second you separate the farm bill, it's so gluttonous that even the Heritage Foundation thinks it's like the Koch brothers, they want to go after it, they want to gut it, that the industry hollowed out its voter base. And it's so gluttonous to corn that I think once you separate them, I think that kind of the modern, that kind of corrupt farm bill would collapse, whereas Walmart would protect food assistance. But you're playing Russian roulette with food assistance. I mean, to be frank, I mean, that's something like I've like really personally wrestled with. I think here's the thing. No, the modern farm bill is collapsing in front of us. They cannot pass an updated farm bill. They keep doing these, like, kick the cans down the road. And it's been underappreciated. It took me a while to get my head around it. Is people talk about MAHA. The thing about MAHA to keep in mind is how many young men are in it. A lot of Joe Rogan, like a lot of young men right now are obsessed with their body. Their body is a temple. Cottage cheese is doing blockbuster numbers right now because young men want to eat protein. They built a new cottage cheese plant in Iowa because cottage cheese sales are up like so much. And you're seeing a lot of like the Republican, their own party cannot pass a status quo Wall Street farm bill because a lot of those Maha men type Republicans don't like it. It's just weird. It's a really weird political moment where like a lot of things are breaking down. So here's the thing. I gave up having a crystal ball on this stuff. I think at some point you just got to do your own plan. At some point, like work towards like, what's the farm bill you want? Because right now what tends to happen is, and what I've seen in DC, a lot of groups, they'll play on the margins. Like, well, we want a $5 million program for a pilot. So they'll give you like a little like crumb, but in the structure ends up screwing you, pardon my French. So it's like, at some point you just got to play your own game. Like this is what our farm bill should be, and just focus on that.
Thanks, Austin. Again, kind of along the same lines, the HR one, the decoupled SNAP from farm subsidies. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, what bill better says what moment we're living in, that we're living in a Gilded Age where you're gutting assistance to working people, working poor. healthcare and food to pay for tax cuts for the oligarchs. I mean, it's peak Robert. I mean, the fact that what shocked me in the last 6 months is how much the phrase oligarchs has entered popular American discourse.
Right.
I had a hard time selling this book 4 years ago. People are telling me like Robert Barron, you're like, and the funny thing about this book, I gotta tell you guys, I was telling someone, oh man, I was talking with the young man to help arrange this call. Sorry, he's
Jackson, yeah.
Jackson. My book sells really well in Middle America. It doesn't sell well on the coast. Like then I can't get any attention in the New York media. And this book is sold really well, but it's like it shows you. I think like most, especially people, just especially in like I just think in Iowa, like people, everyone sees the system's fucked. The system's not working. They just feel like it's not right, and they don't know why. That's why I like this robber baron thing. If instead of blaming the immigrants, you got to justify the anger, blame the oligarchs. But you got to name a name. You got to humanize them for people. Like, here's the thing. I could have done 10 different hog barons. Like 10 companies control like 80% of the hog supply. I focus on this one hog baron because to be frank, they made the best story. So when you read my book, I didn't want to tell the same robber baron story over and over. So you'll see like, to me, my hog baron's like a trashy Florida New Money. And then Cargill's my aristocratic Connecticut waspy. It was a narrative device, but you have to lean into the story component and the political theater of it all. You need to like, because the system, they win when people don't pay attention. So how do you put on a show? I mean, that's why I went to my hog baron's hometown. Especially in these moments, like you gotta like, if not now, then when? Like for me, even the phrase Iowa is an extraction colony, that's I don't try to use those words when I talk to people in Iowa because it's too hard. People don't want to hear that. But it's one of those things where like that's what's happening right now is just you're seeing a lot of in rural America, I've noticed a Stockholm syndrome. Like a lot of people felt power they lost, or people like Vilsack will say they'll do something. People right now need to see points on the board. So that's why actually schools I think are so important because you need to show that you can make progress. And then brag about it because like it helps like because you don't I don't know. I just feel like you can't predict anything in America anymore.
Yeah, like looking local, looking at things that where there's common ground, schools, hospitals, that kind of a thing.
Julie Dunn gets like when she beats a CAFO, I mean, come on, she has a little party. Like when you take on someone with all the money and power and you win, you're not going to win most of the time, but you just get these little moments of breakthrough. Like I didn't talk about these slides. I cut this from I have a whole coffee bear in my chapter, and that's really about monopoly in my book. I think I can complain about Vilsack all day, but on the other side, one of President Biden's best political appointees was a young woman named Lena Khan, who was chair of the Federal Trade Commission. This young woman, young mother, I should say, she was doing all this, and most people don't know she had an infant. She's the one that brought back anti-monopoly stuff in America. She's the one that filed all those anti-monopoly cases against big tech. And she got 2 victories against Google. And the Trump administration is continuing on a lot of that. They're starting a case now to break up Google. What do you do to Google? These things don't happen overnight, but this is incredible. Like she walks into any law school in America and every kid wants to be her. She did an event on fertilizer monopolies in Iowa 2 summers ago, and she got 100 people in a room. Like people want to believe in public servants doing the right thing. So I can rant about her all day. But she is like, here's the thing, that was a movement. Like a lot of people in that world really pushed her, elevated her. And, they got a position of power. They came with names. Remember I mentioned earlier that Plum book? Who do you want to be Secretary of Agriculture? Who do you want to be the undersecretary? These are very, very powerful positions. And yes, Barron's is on audio. I do not read it. Fun fact, I had an audition. My rights were sold to some other company and I talk too fast, which I'm sorry. I talk fast when I get excited.
Yeah. Yeah, but that power analysis, that power mapping is extremely important. And while we are at time, I want to value, everyone's time. Is there anything we missed, anything you want to leave us with, Austin? I think from kind of a selfish standpoint, I think a lot of folks come to this from like a conservation standpoint, and what are the impacts of consolidation and vertical integration for I think we wanted to ask too about like consumers in the grocery store, but I feel like you covered that well. But from like a conservation standpoint,
Yeah, so a few things. Three things to leave you guys with. One, my whole book is a nice way of rejecting Michael Pollan. You do not change the system with your fork. No one's gonna give you a seat at the table. And this is also like, I think I'm the first in my family to go to college. I'm just kind of naturally like a feisty person. You have to fight for a seat. You have to lean into power politics. Like no one, JBS will not give, like, not do the right thing. You have to like just know that going into it. Second thing is, um, I can't say this enough. It's easy to be really dark right now, but also like be. I've had so much fun with this. I mean, like, it's weird as it sounds. How do I explain this? I think there's a lack of gratefulness among some Americans right now. Like we have it. America's so fat. Like I don't want to romanticize the food. A lot of people in the past will do the Wendell Berry thing. They'll romanticize. Oh, look how great the New Deal Farm Bill was. It was really good for white farm owners. It was really bad to black farmers. So there's never really been a multicultural democracy in the history of the world. And so people are fighting for it. Like focus on the positiveness. Like there's a lot of cool things going on. Articulate the hope. Because right now, in my belief, neither party is articulating a hope for food or for rural America. And people need the hope to rush the gate. And so like, that's why it sounds cheesy to say, I say this all the time, Iowa should be the Tuscany, North America. What is the hope of Montana? What is that concept? What does that system look like? Because like to me, the unsaid thing is move to Bozeman or robotics for like grain production. Like you gotta like think about what's the hope? Like what is the future going to be? What's a positive vision in order so you can overcome the power? And finally, please reach out. If there's anything you read in the book that I missed, like thank you for that book recommendation on the crazies. It's amazing that the richest family in the world in America, or sorry, largest private company, and like there's just so much we don't know. And so any of these little tidbits, like I love hearing it. Let me know what Baron you find the most interesting. Um, so yeah, just feel free to reach out. I mean, that's like my favorite little thing to hear, and I can't thank you guys enough for this. And the best thing you could do for an author is recommend the book to someone because word of mouth is everything. If you enjoy it.
Let me step in here, Gusty. Austin, well, thank you very much. I'm surprised there isn't a whole host of raised hands here, but I think you've given us
Oh, I think
quite a.
Patty has a hand.
There's a hand. Patty, go ahead. Go for it. Take yourself off mute.
Yes, thank you very much. And I am going to buy the book. Um, my husband and I can afford to buy from family farms in Montana. And we like to do that. We go to the farmer's market, we buy from producers that we don't eat a lot of protein, but we eat enough. And we mix a lot with grain and I like lentils a lot, which is a great protein source. Anyway, not everybody can do what we do. But and our school system did buy local beef, but it was obviously more expensive. But what couldn't we do to promote our local farmers and ranchers beyond just buying their food?
So real quick, Patty, the funniest question. So there are two questions I always get usually when I do a book talk is one, am I worried about my safety? And two, where do I buy my food? I always hesitate with that second, like, is I'm fortunate to have the income to buy, I can afford the fancy beef. I realize a lot of people are barely getting by right now and they want, you know what's funny? I can tell you guys this story. I've had one interview I've done, it got jumped, it never aired. Have you ever heard of America's Test Kitchen? The guy with the little bow tie, I did an interview with him. He never aired it because we got into a big argument. He blamed, there's clearly a class thing going on with obesity in America. He wanted more people to have more personal responsibility for their obesity. And I was like, you don't know what it's like to be a single parent with two kids. And also like a Hot Pocket's a really good buy. For $1 or $2 each, you're getting a protein, a carb, and a thing. And it's just like so naive and like it's so whatever. It's certain people in the food world make a living by being hacks for industry. That said, to your question, is the single best thing you can do is actually pair up people you buy from, help pair them up with the schools, pressure the schools, like a lot of these school mill directors just don't have they don't have the time to go out there, build these relationships. If you can help do that, and just having a chorus of people working together, like a team of people to help like with procurement, like imagine just all the lentils in the schools. I mean, I didn't have real lentils until I was an adult. And it took me, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of cool things you could do there that really helps those farmers. Is because there's only so many people that can afford, the market's only so big for that. But if you could pair them with institutional buyers, that's key. And that's something I really can't say enough is like it's especially like University of Montana, like all that. I just assume most of this is just frozen food from Cisco.
Yeah, Austin. In terms of schools, Vilsack and Biden just at the end in October before the election proposed $3 billion for procurement of local foods, and of course.
So here's my criticism on that. Why did it take 4 years? Wars were fought in that time. I mean, dear God, that was my biggest criticism of their meat regulations. Why did it take like Bill? You did this 8 years ago. You know how this game's played. There's like a classic thing where people still walk things, pretend that way. Bill Sykes did this before.
Yeah, he did.
I know it's like it's the hardest thing for me to tell Democrats right now, especially in Iowa, is like people like Vilsack undermine you.
Yeah,
it's really it's like this. Whatever. At some point you just gotta be like, that's the old guard and you gotta have a new guard. Who should be the next Secretary of Agriculture? I would love it if it's a school district director.
Well, I think one of our next congressman wants to ask a question here. Steve, go ahead.
Gilles, you're so funny. Hey, Austin, thank you so much, man. So besides reading Gilles' books, got to plug his. I don't know if you've read Gilles' books.
Hmm?
Do you know about Bob Quinn and the Quinn Institute up in that country too?
No.
You need to read about Bob Quinn. He does a lot of this sustainable agriculture. He is in the West Wing this week, meeting with the agricultural secretary and Robert Kennedy Jr. He's another resource that you need to have so you can talk with him. I mean, I'm sure he's going to be on board with you as much as Gilles and I and hopefully everybody on the call is. Just a resource for you. So wondering if you knew him. Thank you so much for this work, and I plan to buy the book as well. I'd like you to inscribe the audiobook for me if you would.
Well, thanks for
man.
that tidbit, and best luck with the campaign. I mean, it is. I can't say this. I mean, I'm going to Texas in 10 days to talk with the Texas Republican legislator about different stuff like this on school food. You're seeing this is weird coalitions. Like here's the thing. I really do believe things happen in America when weird bedfellows get together, and you have to embrace it. You have Cory Booker working with Mike Lee of Utah. Sorry, not Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren on checkoff reform. You have Cory Booker working with Josh Hawley, Missouri on meatpacking. Embrace it. They might be using you, use them. Who knows? Outflank people. But it's there's a lot of senators who are saying nothing, and that's the problem. Or representative, I should say. Like every representative of Montana should be signed on to all these packing bills, but they're not.
All right, last call for questions. Really appreciate the good dialogue, the amazing presentation. And yeah, get the book.
I should say too, just Patty, to your point. So when I travel, I love going to grocery stores. I was shocked that there was a lot of cool local grains going on in Montana at your grocery store. I came home with a lot of pancake mixes from Montana grains. All pancakes at school meals. You know what I mean? Like people are doing it. Just help them grow their businesses and like just kind of play your own game. There's something like, especially at this moment, you can't control what's going to happen in DC. You can't control what a man's going to tweet. What you can control is what's served at your school. And brag about it. Like that's the funniest thing is a lot of people that do this stuff aren't good at bragging about it. You got to tell the local media, take the photo out. You know what I mean? And then also like, because you want to, it's I can't say this enough. It's the politics on this are so good. But you're also really going at the system in a ways that people don't realize, because you're breaking down this whole BS foreign free trade system when you do Montana beef and Montana squirrels, but you're not saying it, you're localizing it. Well, feel free to guys to reach out. I'm gonna put my email in here. Just so you all have it.
Well, thank you very much, Austin. And I was told to make one last bid. If anybody is on this call who's not a member of Northern Plains, they really need to sign up there. Okay, and thank you very much, Austin. I mean, this was your book is a incredibly researched piece of work. It must have taken you a very long time, and it's very, very, very readable. I can't recommend it more highly.
I appreciate it. It's 200 pages, so it's not that bad, but there's like 60 pages of footnotes because I didn't realize when you write a book now, the liability is on the author. So if you're going to write a book about robber barons, you got to cross your T's and dot your I's.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you so much. I plan to get the book.